He was known as a man who never lost. In the business world, people spoke about him with respect and fear. He was not born rich, but he had climbed every step with his own effort. Long days, sleepless nights, and endless risks had turned him into a powerful businessman. He believed money was safety and success was everything. He trusted numbers more than people and contracts more than emotions. For years, his life followed the same routine. Early mornings in a glass office, meetings that never ended, phone calls that decided the future of others. He lived in a big city apartment with lights that never went off. Expensive cars waited for him downstairs, and people smiled at him even when they didn't mean it. He was surrounded by people, yet he was alone. He rarely thought about the past. The village where he was born felt like a distant memory. His parents had passed away early, and poverty had taught him one lesson: never depend on anyone. That belief pushed him forward, but it also made his heart hard. He helped charities sometimes, but only quietly, never personally. To him, emotions were weakness. Everything changed the year he decided to expand his business too fast. A trusted partner, someone he had worked with for years, convinced him to invest heavily in a new project. The numbers looked perfect. The promises sounded real. He signed the papers without doubt. Within weeks, strange things started happening. Payments were delayed. Accounts didn't match. When he asked questions, answers were unclear. Then one morning, he woke up to dozens of missed calls. Banks had frozen his accounts. The partner had disappeared. Money was gone. At first, he thought it was a mistake. He believed his power could fix anything. He made calls, hired lawyers, sent notices, but the truth was cruel. The documents were legal. The loss was real. His company collapsed faster than it had grown. Employees lost jobs. Offices shut down. The same people who once praised him now avoided him. Friends stopped calling. Invitations stopped coming. In just a few months, his world fell apart. The worst part was not losing money. It was losing identity. He no longer knew who he was without success. The city that once felt like home became heavy and cold. Everywhere he went, memories followed him. He felt watched, judged, and broken. One evening, after another failed attempt to recover his business, he sat alone in his empty apartment. The furniture was gone. The walls echoed. He looked around and realized there was nothing left to stay for. That night, he packed a small bag. No luxury clothes, no expensive watch, just simple items. He left the city quietly, without telling anyone. He didn't know where he was going, only that he needed to disappear. After days of travel, he reached a small village. It was quiet, dusty, and far from the noise of the city. People lived simple lives there. No one knew him. No one cared who he was before. For the first time, that felt like relief, but relief did not bring food. He had no savings, no contacts, and no pride left to protect. He walked from place to place, asking for work. Some people laughed. Some ignored him. Finally, the village council offered him a job as a street sweeper. The pay was small, but it was honest. The first day of work was the hardest. Holding a broom felt heavier than any business deal he had ever handled. People passed by without looking at him. Some children whispered. A few adults mocked him. Every sweep felt like a reminder of how far he had fallen. At night, his body ached. His hands blistered. He slept on a thin mat in a small rented room. The silence was loud. Memories returned stronger than ever. There were moments when he questioned his existence, but he pushed those thoughts away. He told himself this was temporary. He would survive. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, his body adjusted. His mind grew quieter. The village had a rhythm that didn't care about status. The sun rose, people worked, and life went on. No one asked about his past. It was during one of those quiet mornings that he noticed her. She was young, dressed in simple clothes, carrying a small bucket of water. She walked carefully along the dusty road, helping her mother with daily chores. There was tiredness in her eyes, but also strength. Life had not been kind to her, yet she moved forward without complaint. When she passed by him, She didn't look away or laugh. She simply nodded and said good morning. Her voice was soft, respectful, and real. It surprised him. The next day, she did the same, and the next. Sometimes she offered him water when the sun was harsh. Sometimes she shared a piece of bread. She never asked questions, never showed pity. He didn't know why her small gestures affected him so deeply. Perhaps because no one had treated him like a human being in a long time. Not a boss, not a failure, just a person. He began to look forward to those brief moments. They were short, but they carried warmth. In a life stripped of meaning, kindness became everything. As the days passed, something inside him slowly started to change. The pain of the past was still there, but it no longer controlled him. For the first time, he felt a quiet sense of belonging. Even in his broken state, he did not know it yet. But this small village and this poor girl were about to change his life in ways money never could. Life in the village moved slowly, but it had a rhythm that was both comforting and challenging. The streets were dusty, the houses simple, and the people relied on each other to get through the day. Our man, once a billionaire, had now become a small part of this world, carrying a broom instead of a briefcase. Every morning he walked the same paths, swept the same streets, and cleaned the same corners. It was exhausting work, yet there was a strange peace in its simplicity. At first he felt invisible. Villagers barely noticed him. Children ran past, women called out greetings, but no one expected much from a sweeper. He had to learn quickly how to survive without pride. He learned that survival sometimes meant ignoring the sneers, swallowing the embarrassment, and just focusing on the work at hand. The girl continued to appear in his life, a quiet presence that made the days feel lighter. She carried water, tended to small chores for her family, and sometimes helped other villagers. Despite her own hardships, she moved with a sense of dignity that caught his attention. Her family had little, yet she managed to bring smiles to those around her. He began noticing her more than the work he did or the dust he swept away. He noticed the way her hair fell across her forehead, the careful movements of her hands, the resilience in her eyes. There was something rare in her presence, warmth he hadn't felt in years. He started small. When she dropped a piece of bread on the road, he picked it up silently and handed it back. When she looked tired, he offered water without waiting for her to ask. At first she seemed surprised. No one in the village had treated him, or anyone, with that kind of attention without expecting something in return. She never asked about him, never judged him, and never laughed at his old city ways. This simple acceptance felt new and precious to him. The work itself was hard. Dust filled his lungs, his back ached from bending, and blisters formed on his hands. But over time he learned the rhythm. Early mornings were for sweeping the streets before the village came alive. Afternoons were for cleaning the market area, where traders called out and children played around his feet. Evenings brought quiet, a chance to reflect on the day and the strange peace he felt in doing honest work. Unlike his life in the city, here effort had direct meaning. When a street was clean, it stayed clean. When a villager needed help, he could provide it. Success was simple, tangible, and personal. He began noticing the small struggles of the villagers. The old man who carried water from the river, the mother who cooked with little fuel, the children who ran barefoot on rough stones. He remembered his own childhood, the poverty that had once defined him. He realized that he had spent so much of his life chasing money that he had forgotten the basic value of life: connection, kindness, and simple effort. The girl often observed him silently, perhaps sensing his struggle to adapt. Sometimes she would sit nearby, watching him sweep or offering a small smile as she passed by. Her presence was gentle but persistent. It didn't demand anything, but it reminded him that he was not alone. Slowly, he began to feel a sense of belonging, though he knew he didn't yet deserve it. One day, a strong wind swept through the village, carrying dust and debris into every corner. He worked tirelessly, sweeping and clearing what he could, but it seemed endless. The girl appeared with her own small broom, helping him clean a narrow street. They didn't speak much, but their teamwork created a bond stronger than words. In that shared labor, he saw her determination, and in her determination, he found inspiration. He realized that life's value was not in wealth or status, but in effort, persistence, and the little gestures that made the day better for someone else. As the weeks passed, their interactions grew more natural. He found himself looking forward to her presence, noticing her routines, and quietly anticipating her smiles. He began learning more about the village life, the families, and their small joys and sorrows. He saw children learning to read under the shade of a tree, women trading small goods at the market, and elders sharing stories in the evenings. Life was raw, real, and demanding, but it was honest. Despite the comfort of the routine, he faced moments of doubt. Some days, the shame of his fall returned sharply. Seeing children play reminded him of his own lost opportunities. Walking past the villagers who ignored him reminded him of how alone he had become. But then he would see her resilience, and the little acts of kindness that connected her to everyone around her. He realized that perhaps these simple connections were the truest form of life. One evening, after the work was done, he found himself sitting on a small bench outside his room. The sky was painted with hues of orange and pink. The girl passed by carrying water and nodded at him. He smiled back, a gesture he had almost forgotten how to do. In that quiet moment, he understood that he had begun to care about life again. Not for wealth, not for recognition, but for the sheer human connection that he had been missing for so long. The village began to feel like home. Its rhythm, its simplicity, and its people slowly removed the layers of pride and fear he had built over years. He realized that every sweep of the broom, every small task, every gesture of kindness was shaping a new understanding of life. And at the center of this change was Hertha girl, who worked quietly, who lived humbly, and who offered warmth without expectation. Life was not easy. The work was still hard, the pay small, and the days long. But now, there was meaning. The fall from wealth and power had brought him closer to life itself. He had learned to respect effort, to notice kindness, and to value simple moments. And through it all, she had been there not as a savior, but as a companion, showing him that life could still be beautiful even when everything else was lost. Weeks turned into months, and the routine of village life began to settle into a rhythm for him. Each morning he woke before sunrise, walked through the quiet streets, and started sweeping with care. Though his body was tired from the physical labor, his mind had begun to feel lighter than it had in years. The simplicity of life, the honesty of work, and the small kindnesses around him slowly healed the wounds of his past. The girl had become a steady presence in his life. She moved through the village like a quiet force of nature, helping her family and those around her without complaint. She did not speak much to him at first, but small gestures built a bridge between them. Sometimes she would offer him water on a particularly hot day. Sometimes she would smile as she passed, a smile that seemed to say, "I see you, and it's okay." It was not pity, nor was it flattery. It was genuine warmth. And he began to crave that warmth more than he ever craved success or money. He started noticing things about her he had never paid attention to before. The way her hands moved when she carried water, careful and steady. The determination in her eyes, which never wavered even when life was hard. Her voice soft and calm, which seemed to soothe even his restless mind. For the first time in years, he found himself not thinking about numbers or deals, but thinking about her. And with that realization came a strange feeling he had not known before: concern, care, and eventually affection. Life, however, was not just peaceful moments. The work was hard and sometimes frustrating. Villagers were not always kind, and there were days when the shame of his past and the reality of his present weighed heavily on him. He would sometimes sit in his small room at night, looking out at the village under the moonlight, and wonder if he had truly fallen so far that no path back existed. But then he would think of her small acts of kindness, her quiet strength, and a sense of hope would return. One afternoon, as he was sweeping the market area, he noticed a commotion near the village well. A small child had fallen into the water, and the villagers were shouting for help. Without thinking, he ran toward the child, jumped in, and pulled them out, coughing and soaked. The girl ran toward him, her face filled with worry. She handed him a clean cloth and helped him dry off. In that moment, he felt a connection he could not explain, a bond formed not from words, but from shared concern and trust. From that day forward, their interactions became more natural. She would talk to him about her day, the chores she had done, the dreams she held quietly in her heart. He listened, really listened, something he had not done for years. He shared little about himself at first, too proud or too cautious to reveal the man he had once been. But through their conversations, he began to open up slowly, sharing small stories from his childhood, memories of his parents, and the lessons he had learned from life. Her presence brought a sense of stability to his turbulent mind. He began to understand the importance of human connection, something he had ignored in his pursuit of wealth. Her resilience in the face of hardship became a source of inspiration. He watched her carry heavy water jugs, help her mother with work, and manage the small responsibilities of life with grace. It reminded him of the strength he had once admired in his own parents and of the lessons poverty had taught him, lessons he had tried to forget but now began to embrace once again. The village itself had a way of teaching him about life's simplicity and honesty. He saw how people lived with little yet supported one another. Children shared food, neighbors helped each other with repairs, and everyone respected effort, no matter how small. He realized that in the city, he had surrounded himself with wealth and power, but had lost touch with these basic truths. Here, he was learning them anew, and it was transforming him in ways money never could. Sometimes, the girl would ask for his help with small things, lifting a heavy basket, carrying water, or fixing a broken tool. Each time, he helped without hesitation, finding satisfaction in doing something tangible and meaningful. He began to see that life's true value was not in what one owned, but in the effort one gave, and the care one showed to others. As their bond grew, he became aware of emotions he had long buried. Compassion, care, and affection surfaced slowly, carefully. He found himself thinking about her when she was not around, hoping she was safe, hoping she was well. And he began to understand that he was no longer alone in the world, that this small connection, this quiet presence, was filling a space in his heart that he did not even know was empty. One evening, after the work was done and the village had settled into quiet, he found himself walking along the edge of the fields where the girl often worked. She was gathering herbs for her family, and he watched from a distance, not wanting to disturb her. The sun was setting, painting the sky with colors that reminded him of childhood evenings. He felt a deep sense of peace, a calm that had been absent for years. It was as if life, in its simplest form, had finally started to make sense. He began to take care of little things for her family, quietly fixing a leaky roof, helping repair a fence, carrying heavy loads. He never sought recognition, only the quiet satisfaction of making life a little easier for those who needed it. The girl noticed, of course, but she never asked questions. She simply accepted his help with a quiet smile, reinforcing the bond of trust and care between them. Over time, he realized that his feelings for her were deeper than friendship. He cared for her in a way that went beyond admiration. He cared for her well-being, her safety, and her happiness. And though he was cautious and unsure how to express these feelings, he knew that she had brought something priceless into his life, a sense of belonging, warmth, and hope that no amount of wealth could ever buy. Even with this growing connection, he remained humble, aware of his place in the village, and respectful of the life she led. He understood that love, if it were to grow, needed patience, respect, and understanding. He did not rush. He simply learned, observed, and allowed their relationship to develop naturally, built on trust, shared effort, and quiet moments. The girl, in her gentle way, had begun to teach him about life once again, how to value effort, how to appreciate kindness, and how to care for another human being without expectation. And in learning these lessons, he started to rebuild a part of himself that had been lost in the pursuit of power and money. He realized that life's true wealth was measured not by what one owned, but by the connections one formed and the love one shared. Even in the humblest of circumstances, months passed, and their bond grew stronger, though it remained unspoken in many ways. They shared work, small conversations, and quiet moments of understanding. Through her, he discovered the beauty of simplicity, the strength and resilience, and the power of genuine human connection. And as he learned these lessons, he began to understand that life had a way of giving back, even when everything seemed lost. She had not only entered his life but had quietly begun to heal the man he had become. One small gesture at a time. Life continued quietly in the village, and he had grown into his new existence, accepting the simple, humble routine that each day demanded. Months of labor, of small gestures, of careful observation, to gentle conversation with the girl, had brought a rhythm to his life that was almost comforting. He no longer thought about the city or his lost wealth every day. Instead, he focused on the work at hand, the villagers around him, the quiet bond that had formed with the girl. Yet life has a way of revealing truths that one cannot ignore forever. One morning, while he was sweeping the main street, a stranger appeared, a man in a sharp suit, carrying documents and speaking urgently with the village council. Curiosity drew him closer. As he listened from a distance, he realized the man had come from the city. His heart sank as he understood the reason for this unexpected visitor. Someone had recognized him. The man in the suit mentioned a high-profile case, a collapsed company, and the fallen businessman. Not knowing how drastically his life had changed, the village was abuzz. Whispers spread quickly. People began to look at him differently. Some approached with awe, some with curiosity, and a few with suspicion. It was as if a shadow from the past had fallen onto the small village, disrupting the quiet life he had grown to appreciate. And through it all, the girl remained calm, observing silently, trying to make sense of what was happening. The recognition brought mixed emotions. On one hand, he felt fear of being exposed, of losing the simple life he had started to enjoy, and fear of judgment. On the other hand, there was relief, a deep sense that the truth could no longer be hidden, that perhaps he could finally reconcile with who he was. But the most pressing concern in his mind was her reaction. How would she see him now? Would she care that he had once been wealthy and powerful? Or would it create a barrier between them? He decided to face it honestly, to speak with her before anyone else could influence her perception. That evening, after the day's work, he found her sitting by the edge of the field, gathering herbs for her family. The sun was low, casting golden light on her hair. He approached quietly and sat beside her, his hands still holding the tools of his labor. He spoke gently, explaining who he had been, the life he had lived, the fall he had endured, and the choices that had led him to the village. He did not expect forgiveness, nor did he demand it. He simply wanted her to know the truth, to understand that despite appearances, he was still the same person who had grown to care for her and the people around him. She listened quietly, her eyes steady and calm. She did not interrupt, did not judge, and did not laugh. When he finished, she reached out and touched his hand lightly, a gesture that conveyed understanding rather than judgment. She told him that his past did not define him, that what mattered was who he was now, the effort he put into life and the kindness he showed. Her words were simple but powerful, like a balm to a wound he hadn't realized had been so deep. Relief washed over him. In that moment, he realized that the bond they had formed was stronger than status, stronger than wealth, and stronger than fear. Her acceptance reminded him that genuine human connection transcends all the superficial barriers society imposes. He felt a new sense of freedom, a sense that he could finally embrace life fully, without hiding, without fear. The following days were filled with subtle adjustments. Villagers continued to talk, some in admiration, some in curiosity, but he no longer felt the weight of judgment as heavily. The girl remained by his side, assisting him quietly, smiling softly, and sharing small moments that strengthened their bond. Their relationship, which had grown through work, effort, and trust, now had a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. He began to take small steps to rebuild his life without returning to the city. He helped villagers with practical tasks, repairing roofs, building fences, and assisting with water distribution. He invested quietly in small local businesses, not to gain profit, but to improve life in the village. His actions were noticed, not as charity, but as genuine care. People slowly began to appreciate the man who had once been a stranger, but now worked tirelessly for the community. The girl continued her daily life as well, managing her family's needs, helping neighbors, and observing quietly. She had become an anchor for him, a source of calm and stability. He learned to respect her resilience, her ability to find joy in small things, and her unwavering sense of responsibility. Through her, he understood the quiet strength that many overlooked, kind of strength that did not demand attention, but deserved respect nonetheless. Their connection deepened naturally. They shared small conversations about daily chores, the village, and their hopes for the future. He found himself valuing her opinions, trusting her judgment, and seeking her guidance in decisions that affected not just him, but the villagers around them. He had never experienced such a sense of partnership before. A partnership built not on convenience or status, but on respect, care, and mutual understanding. One evening, as they walked together through the fields after finishing work, they shared a moment of quiet reflection. The sun was setting, casting long shadows and bathing the land in soft light. He realized that in the village, amidst the dust, sweat, and labor, he had discovered something far more valuable than money or power. He had discovered the importance of connection, of trust, of care, and he had discovered the girl who had quietly entered his life, transforming it in ways he could not have imagined. The recognition of his past had brought challenges, but it had also brought clarity. He now understood that wealth and status were temporary, but kindness, effort, and genuine human connection were lasting. The girl had taught him lessons that no business venture ever could. She had shown him the strength of humility, the power of compassion, and the value of simple, honest work. In the quiet of the village, he began to see life in a new light. He no longer feared exposure, judgment, or failure. He embraced his role, not as a fallen businessman, but as a human being, learning to live fully and meaningfully. And through it all, she remained by his side. A quiet reminder that love, respect, and connection were more valuable than anything he had ever known. Their relationship, forged in simplicity and strengthened by honesty, continued to grow. He helped the village, she helped her family, and together they built a small but meaningful world. The shadows of his past no longer dictated his present. He was free to live, to care, and to love, with the girl who had become his anchor, his guide, and his heart in ways he never thought possible. Life, in its most basic and human form, had given him a second chance, and he was ready to embrace it fully. Life had become a rhythm for him, each day blending into the next with quiet purpose. Months of living in the village, working as a sweeper, and quietly connecting with the girl had changed him in ways he had never imagined. The weight of his past, once unbearable, had begun to lift. He was no longer defined by wealth or loss, but by effort, care, and the bonds he had formed in the simple life he now led. The girl continued her daily routine, her presence steady and comforting. She had become an integral part of his life, though he rarely acknowledged it aloud. He admired her quiet strength, her resilience, and the way she managed her responsibilities without complaint. Watching her navigate the challenges of life with grace and determination reminded him of what truly mattered: human connection, compassion, and the small moments that make life meaningful. He found himself thinking about her constantly, not in the way of desire or pride, but with a deep sense of care. He worried when she carried heavy loads, celebrated silently when she succeeded in a small task, and felt a quiet joy when she smiled at him. His affection had grown slowly, organically, through shared work, shared effort, and shared understanding. The villagers had come to accept him as part of their community. They saw the effort he put into his work and the help he offered, and they respected him for it. There was no admiration for wealth or status here, only for diligence, honesty, and the willingness to care for others. He had found a place where his value was measured not by what he had lost, but by what he gave. One day, a small crisis tested everything he had learned. A storm had swept through the village, leaving fallen trees, damaged roofs, and flooded fields. The villagers were overwhelmed, unsure how to repair the damage quickly. He sprang into action, organizing efforts to clear debris, repair homes, and ensure everyone had food and water. The girl worked beside him, her energy tireless despite the long day. They coordinated quietly, relying on unspoken understanding, and together they brought order and relief to the village. Through this crisis, he realized the depth of his growth. He no longer felt helpless or dependent on outside recognition. He had learned to act, to care, and to lead in a way that was humble but effective. The experience reinforced his bond with the girl, whose presence had been constant, patient, and unjudging throughout. Together, they had faced adversity without ego, without competition, and without fear. After the storm, as the village slowly recovered, he reflected on the transformation that had occurred within him. The life he had lost in the city had been replaced with a life of authenticity, effort, and connection. He understood that love was not about wealth or status, but about presence, care, and mutual respect. The girl had shown him that life's true value was found in the small, consistent acts of kindness and the genuine bonds between people. He began to think about the future differently. The past no longer held him hostage, and the city's trappings seemed irrelevant. He wanted to build a life that was meaningful, not measured by money, but by impact, care, and love. He began quietly investing in village projects, supporting education for children, improving water systems, and helping families with small businesses. Each action was deliberate, rooted in the desire to give back, not to gain recognition. The girl's role in his life had evolved naturally. They spent more time together, sharing simple meals, walking through fields, and discussing hopes for the future. There was no pressure, no grand gestures, only a steady understanding that had grown from months of shared experience. He learned to trust her judgment, rely on her insights, and value her opinions. Their relationship had become a partnership built on respect, trust, and quiet affection. One evening, as the sun set over the village, he found himself sitting beside her on a small hill overlooking the fields. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, and the air was warm with the last light of day. They shared silence for a long moment, appreciating the beauty around them and the journey they had taken together. He finally spoke, softly sharing his thoughts and hopes. He expressed gratitude for her presence in his life, for the lessons she had taught him about resilience, kindness, and love. He admitted that he had once thought wealth and status defined success, but now he understood that true success was measured by impact, compassion, and connection. She listened, her eyes steady and understanding. A quiet affirmation that he had grown, that he had learned, and that they were both ready to move forward together. The girl, in her gentle way, responded with words that reaffirmed their bond. She did not judge his past, nor did she expect perfection. She simply recognized the effort, care, and sincerity he had shown over the months. Her acceptance, without conditions or expectations, deepened his understanding of love and trust. He realized that he had not only found a companion, but also a teacher, someone who had guided him back to the values that truly mattered as days turned into weeks. Their life continued with a sense of stability and purpose. He embraced his work in the village, helping wherever he could, supporting education, assisting families, and ensuring the community thrived. The girl remained by his side, contributing in her own way, teaching him patience, resilience, and the quiet power of consistent effort. Over time, it became a visible part of the village's heart. People respected them, not because of past wealth or hidden status, but because of the consistency, care, and humility they demonstrated. Their story spread quietly, an example of how life's challenges could be transformed into meaningful connections and authentic living. He often reflected on how far he had come from a life of power, wealth, and isolation to a life of effort, connection, and meaningful relationships. He had lost everything the city valued, only to gain everything that truly mattered. The girl had been central to this transformation, offering guidance, companionship, and quiet inspiration. Through her, he learned that love, respect, and care were were the richest treasures one could find. Eventually, he understood that the village had given him more than he could ever repay. It had given him a second chance at life, a sense of purpose, and the opportunity to experience love in its most genuine form. The girl had not only stolen his heart, but it also restored it, showing him that true fulfillment comes from connection, effort, and the quiet joys of everyday life. As the story of his life in the village unfolded, he embraced his role fully, not as a former billionaire, not as a man who had fallen, but as someone who had learned to live authentically. And through it all, the girl remained his anchor, his guide and his heart, proving that the simplest bonds, formed in shared effort and genuine care, could be stronger and more enduring than anything money could ever buy. Life in the village had settled into a steady rhythm for him, and the months of effort, labor, and connection with the girl had brought a deep sense of contentment he had never known. Each day was filled with work that mattered: sweeping streets, repairing homes, helping families with small projects, and ensuring the community thrived. The physical labor was exhausting, but it was honest, meaningful, and grounding. He no longer measured his worth by wealth or status, but by the impact he had on the lives around him. The girl remained a constant presence in his life. Her quiet strength and resilience inspired him every day. She moved through the village with purpose, helping her family, tending to the small tasks of daily life, and assisting neighbors. Her actions were never for recognition, yet they carried a weight that made life better for everyone. He admired her deeply, not just for her hard work, but for the kindness and care she extended to those around her. Through her, he had learned that true strength was silent, persistent, and rooted in empathy. Their bond had grown stronger over the months. They shared conversations, laughter, and moments of quiet understanding. Each small gesture, from offering water to a weary villager to helping lift a heavy load, strengthened the trust and affection between them. He realized that love was not about grand gestures or declarations, but about consistent care, respect, and shared experiences. The village had become more than just a place to live. It had become a home. The people around him respected him for his effort and sincerity. Children ran past him, calling out greetings. Neighbors sought his help and advice. Families appreciated his quiet assistance. He no longer felt like an outsider, nor did he feel the weight of shame from his past life. Instead, he felt a profound sense of belonging, a connection that transcended his previous definitions of success. One morning, a challenge arose that tested everything he had learned. Heavy rains had caused the river to overflow, flooding parts of the village. Homes were damaged, crops threatened, and the community was anxious. He sprang into action, organizing efforts to protect families and their property. The girl worked alongside him tirelessly, coordinating efforts with him, helping move belongings, and comforting frightened children. Their teamwork was seamless, born from months of shared effort and mutual understanding. During this crisis, he observed the resilience of the villagers. They worked together, supporting one another without complaint. The girl's family managed to protect their home, thanks in part to his guidance. Yet she never drew attention to his help. He saw the subtle ways people relied on one another, and he understood that community, effort, and care were the foundations of a meaningful life. After the floodwaters receded, he and the girl walked through the village, observing the recovery efforts. Villagers were repairing homes, clearing debris, and planting new crops. The sense of accomplishment and relief was shared by everyone. He felt a deep satisfaction in having contributed in a meaningful way. He realized that happiness was not found in wealth or possessions, but in the shared effort, resilience, and kindness that bound people together. Over time, their relationship deepened further. They began discussing hopes and dreams, not in terms of material wealth, but in terms of how they could improve the village and support each other. He spoke of initiatives to provide education for children, improve water access, and assist struggling families. She offered her insights, suggestions, and her unwavering support. Together, they formed a partnership rooted in shared values, trust, and mutual respect. He reflected on the transformation he had undergone. The fall from wealth and power had brought him to a place where he could truly understand life's deeper meaning. He had learned humility, compassion, and the value of human connection. He had discovered that true strength lies not in dominance or control, but in effort, empathy, and resilience. And above all, he had found love not in grand gestures or material wealth, but in the quiet, consistent care of someone who truly understood him. The girl had become central to his life in ways he could not have imagined. She was his companion, confidant, and teacher, guiding him through the lessons of patience, humility, and kindness. Her influence had transformed him from a man driven by power and ambition into someone who found fulfillment in service, effort, and connection. As the seasons changed, they continued their work, supporting the village and each other. Their shared life was simple but rich with meaning. They celebrated small victories, comforted one another in challenges, and shared quiet moments of joy. Their relationship, built on trust, effort, and genuine care, had become the foundation of a life far more valuable than any wealth or status could offer. In quiet moments, he would watch her work, noticing the way she carried herself, the determination in her movements, and the kindness she showed to everyone she encountered. He felt a profound gratitude for her presence in his life and the lessons she had taught him. Through her, he had rediscovered the importance of connection, compassion, and love. The village had become a place where he could be fully himself, without pretense or fear. He had found purpose in labor, joy in service, and fulfillment in connection. And at the center of it all was the girl, whose quiet strength, resilience, and kindness had changed his life in ways he could never have anticipated. He understood that life's true. Wealth was measured not by money, power, or status, but by the impact one has on others, the relationships one builds, and the love one shares. And as he continued to walk through the village, sweeping streets, helping families, and supporting his community, he knew that he had found the greatest treasure of all, a life filled with purpose, connection, and love, with the girl who had quietly, steadily, and profoundly stolen his heart. Months turned into years, and the village had become more than just a place to live. It had become home. He had grown into his role as a trusted and respected member of the community. Each day brought new challenges, but also new joys. The work remained physically demanding, but he no longer measured his life by wealth or power. Instead, he measured it by effort, kindness, and the impact he could have on the people around him. The girl, who had once been a quiet presence in his life, had now become his closest companion. Her influence on him had transformed not only his daily routine, but also his understanding of life and love. She taught him patience, resilience, and the value of simple, honest work. Watching her navigate life with grace and strength reminded him daily of what truly mattered. She never sought recognition or praise. She simply acted with care and responsibility, setting an example he could only aspire to follow. Their bond had deepened beyond friendship, built on mutual trust, shared experiences, and quiet understanding. They worked together seamlessly, whether helping neighbors repair homes, distributing water, or organizing small community projects. Each act of kindness, each shared effort, strengthened their connection. He had learned that love was not about grand gestures or romantic words, but about consistent presence, support, and understanding. One day, a severe drought struck the village. Crops withered, wells ran dry, and the villagers faced hardship. He worked tirelessly, digging new wells, finding ways to distribute water fairly, and helping families adapt. The girl assisted him at every turn, her determination unwavering even as the sun beat down relentlessly. They coordinated efforts, organized community support, and made sure no one went without help. Their teamwork became a source of hope for the village. During this time, he reflected on the lessons he had learned over the years. The fall from wealth and power had seemed devastating at first, but it had led him to something far more valuable, a life rooted in purpose, human connection, and meaningful work. He understood now that true wealth was not in money or possessions, but in the relationships one builds, the care one offers, and the impact one leaves on others' lives. As the drought continued, the village grew more reliant on their leadership. People came to him for guidance, advice, and assistance. He had become a figure of trust, not because of his past as a businessman, but because of his consistent effort, humility, and willingness to help. He learned to lead quietly, without demanding attention or credit, focusing instead on tangible improvements for the community. Through it all, the girl remained by his side. She supported him, encouraged him, and reminded him of the importance of compassion and patience. She continued her own work, helping her family and others, demonstrating a quiet strength that inspired everyone around her. Together, they faced challenges, celebrated successes, and shared moments of laughter, quiet reflection, and understanding. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat together by the river. Watching the sun set over the fields, the sky was painted with shades of orange and pink, reflecting in the water. They shared a simple meal, exchanging stories of the day and thoughts about the future. In that moment, he realized how far he had come from a life defined by ambition, wealth, and status, to one defined by effort, love, and meaningful connection. He thought of the city, of the life he had once led, and of the lessons he had learned. The fall that had once seemed like the end had been the beginning of a journey toward true fulfillment. He understood that hardship and loss had opened the door to growth, compassion, and a deeper understanding of life. The village had become a place of healing, learning, and transformation. Their relationship grew in subtle but profound ways. He found joy in sharing responsibilities with her, in seeing her succeed in small tasks, and in witnessing her care for the villagers. She, in turn, valued his guidance, his support, and the sincerity of his efforts. Together, they built a partnership based on trust, respect, and shared purpose, a partnership that transcended traditional notions of wealth or status. Over time, the villagers began to see them not only as individuals, but as a team dedicated to the well-being of the community. They respected him for his actions, admired her for her resilience, appreciated the quiet leadership they provided together. The village had become a testament to the power of collaboration, humility, and consistent effort. As seasons changed, the life they had built together continued to grow richer. They celebrated small victories, supported each other through challenges, and found joy in everyday moments. Their bond, forged through shared work, understanding, and care, had become the foundation of a life filled with purpose, love, and fulfillment in quiet moments. He would reflect on the journey that had brought him here. The city, the wealth, the power, it all seemed distant and unimportant. What mattered now were the connections he had formed, the lives he had touched, and the love he had found. The girl, with her quiet strength and unwavering kindness, had not only captured his heart, but it also guided him toward a life of authenticity, purpose, and joy. He understood that life's true richness was not measured by material wealth, fame, or status, but by the impact one had on others, the relationships one nurtured, and the love one shared. And as he continued to live and work in the village with the girl by his side, he knew that he had found something far more valuable than anything he had ever possessed, a life of meaning, connection, and enduring love.